This story begins with our protagonist, Futaba, who ran to a temple to take shelter from the rain. There, she encountered her classmate, Tanaka Q, who was very kind. He gave her a towel to dry off, and they spent time laughing together until the rain stopped. Just as they were about to leave, they saw a poster for the town festival and agreed to go together. However, poor Futaba was stood up, and her summer romance never happened. Years later, Futaba changed a lot and made two friends named Chi and Asumi. They hated a girl named Yuki, but they weren't the only ones. Everyone disliked Yuki simply because she was pretty. Futaba, on the other hand, was different. Even though she was also pretty, she ate like a truck driver, which scared off any guy who found her attractive. This made her get along well with her friends, who always criticized beauty. One day, she bumped into a guy who looked familiar, so she chased after him because he reminded her of Tanaka. However, one of his friends called him Mabuchi, making Futaba think she was mistaken. After class, she ran into him again at the temple and called him Tanaka, convinced he was the same boy she had fallen for years ago. But he told her to stop calling him that. He was no longer Tanaka since his parents divorced. Now, he was Mabuchi-ku. That didn't matter to Futaba, she just wanted to talk to him again. Unfortunately, the feeling wasn't mutual. Ko didn't like that the sweet girl he had known years ago had turned into someone who talked behind others' backs. Futaba tried to explain that it wasn't her fault, her friends gossiped, and she had to agree to maintain their friendship. However, Ko saw that as cowardice, making it even worse than he initially thought. Poor Futaba lost her crush because of her need to please her friends, but the next day she saw Yuki's handkerchief being thrown out the window. She went to return it to her and surprisingly found Yuki to be a really nice girl. Yuki even offered her a stuffed bunny just because she liked her, but Futaba refused. She didn't want to have anything to do with Yuki. To her surprise, Yuki thanked her just for talking to her. This made Futaba curious. She wondered how Yuki felt about all the gossip surrounding her. However, Yuki didn't care about such things. She just wanted to stay true to herself. Futaba was impressed by her strength. So when her friends mocked Yuki again, Futaba tried to defend her, saying they didn't know her and it wasn't right to speak badly about her. Because of this, her friends got mad at her, which surprised Q, who happened to be passing by. As expected, Futaba's friends left their group chat, so the next day, she was alone and sad during lunch. Ko saw her and gave her a hug as congratulations, but he also told her to stop calling him Tanaka because it was starting to get annoying. Futaba then said she would just call him Ko, which was still annoying but not as much. After class, Futaba's friends left without her. She tried to apologize, saying she never meant to offend them. She had just been honest for the first time since they met. They understood, but if that was her true personality, they couldn't be friends anymore. However, Yuki welcomed her with open arms since they actually got along very well. Weeks later, a new school year began. Futaba ran to check her classroom assignment and discovered that she was in the same class as Yuki. But she was also in the same class as Ko, so for her, it was a double win. To her surprise, on the very first day, Ku was already part of a group. However, without her old friends and with Yuki's bad reputation, Futaba couldn't find anyone to befriend. So she tried talking to Yuki in front of everyone to show that she was just a normal girl. Unfortunately, there were also many rumors about Futaba since she had fought with her friends last year, so her plan to attract other girls didn't work at all. She quickly realized that things wouldn't be easy. Later, when she ran into Ko, she confessed that she was exhausted because trying to be a role model for the class wasn't as easy as it seemed. However, it was too soon to give up, so he told her to keep trying. After all, she had nothing to lose. Thanks to his words, the next day, Futaba volunteered to be the class representative. However, they still needed a male representative, which was much harder to find since no one wanted to take care of the class alongside Futaba. Luckily, Ko stepped in and joined her. Now, they only had to find the people in charge of class activities who would be in constant communication with Tanaka-sensei, Ko's older brother. Interestingly, a girl named Murao joined because she had a crush on Tanaka-sensei. Like a domino effect, her friend Kaminato also volunteered as he was interested in Murao. With him on board, they only needed an events representative, which turned out to be Yuki, as she also wanted to support Futaba. Their first task as school representatives was to plan the school camp. All the representatives gathered to present ideas, but Futaba struggled to control her group. Murao didn't listen, Kaminato was just as uncooperative, and Yuki was too shy to contribute any ideas. To make matters worse, Ku arrived late, wasting a lot of time waiting for him and then apologizing on his behalf. After all, they were supposed to set an example for the other students, and being late wasn't exactly a great example. Tanaka-sensei saved Ko from a bigger scolding but made him write an apology before returning into his group. However, by then all their time had run out, so Futaba had no idea what they would present if asked. Kyo casually suggested that they could just make something up, but Futaba didn't feel confident doing that. Fortunately, an idea suddenly came to her, so she quickly wrote it down and left. When it was time to present, their group was chosen. However, all Futaba had written was that they just needed to create happy memories. Clearly, that wasn't something they could say in front of the teacher. So Ku grabbed the paper and started improvising. Although he made up most of it, he did take inspiration from what Futaba had written. He said the goal was to create meaningful and happy memories with their classmates, which gave his speech credibility. Hours later, Kao ran into Futaba and asked why she was still at school so late. She admitted that she was frustrated by how easily things came to him. She could never make something up that quickly. However, he had actually used her idea as inspiration, so it had been very helpful. She simply worried too much, which made her lose her composure, unlike him who didn't care about anything. Because of that, she found him more respectable and felt no need to become like him. Of course, Ko hadn't always been this way, but it annoyed him that she still refused to accept how much he had changed over the years. Frustrated, he was about to leave, but Futaba stopped him and admitted that she wanted him to go back to the way he was because she hadn't had enough time to process everything. Kao apologized and finally explained that a lot had happened in his family. That's why he never showed up at the fireworks festival, even though he really wanted to go with her. This showed that even if it wasn't obvious, he had been through a lot. Still, Futaba wanted to bring back the Q Tanaka she had met as a child. She believed he was still there, hidden somewhere in his heart. However, when she tried confronting him the next day, she saw him rejecting a very pretty girl. Shocked, Futaba tried to sneak away without being seen, but her spy skills were terrible, so she got caught. The only thing left to do was ask why he had rejected the girl. His answer was simple: he just didn't like her. Futaba then asked if he already had a girlfriend, but that wasn't the case. He simply wasn't interested in anyone. After answering, Q suddenly turned the tables and asked Futaba, "Do you like me?" Futaba didn't say a word. The air grew tense, but in reality, it had just been a joke. Feeling ridiculous for taking it seriously, she sighed in relief. Kyo, trying to lighten the mood, said it didn't matter even if she liked him because either way, he wouldn't date her. But Futaba shot back that she wouldn't date him either. After all, she knew the old Q, and she had liked that one better. That answer ticked Q off. He accused her of being stuck in the past. A few hours later, it was time for cleaning duties. Each group had to finish their tasks, or else they'd have extra work at the camp. Futaba, taking the lead, volunteered to draw lots first. She pulled the worst one: pool cleaning. Everyone's motivation instantly plummeted. As they went to get cleaning supplies, Murao realized that Tanaka-sensei was inside the storage room, so taking the opportunity, she went inside, not just for the brooms, but also to confess. It didn't go well. Tanaka-sensei told her that as long as she was his student, he couldn't even consider the possibility of a relationship. It wasn't an absolute rejection, but it was close enough. Murao returned looking wrecked. She had taken so long that now, everyone was panicking, they were running out of time. On top of that, Futaba kept hovering around Murao, trying to comfort her with her usual, no one should be alone philosophy. But Murao hated that mindset, she liked being alone. Now the air felt even heavier. To make things worse, Yuki sprained her ankle. Kyo carried her to the infirmary, and Murao and Kaminato gave up. They figured there was no way they could finish all the work with just 3 people. But for Futaba, that wasn't an excuse. She declared that she would do the work of 3 people herself if she had to. It would finish. Inspired by her determination, Murao changed her mind and decided to help. And with her in, Kaminato joined for free. Meanwhile, at the infirmary, Yuki apologized to Kao for tagging along with their group. She felt like she was just bothering them. But Kao, not seeing any reason for her to feel that way, told her, "Nobody is annoying just for existing." Those words lit up Yuki's face. Back at the pool, Futaba realized they still had to clean the changing rooms. While scrubbing, she suddenly froze. A spider. She nearly had a heart attack. But then Kao showed up. And, as always, he saved the day. Once they returned, the 4 of them finally managed to finish their cleaning duties. Yuki thanked them all and apologized again for making them work with one less person. But that's what friends were for. She felt sad. Her mission to erase loneliness from the class wasn't progressing the way she had hoped. But to Yuki, the fact that she even tried was important. Her efforts weren't wasted. Later, while heading out to get some water, Futaba spotted Q on the rooftop. She climbed up to talk to him, and he casually mentioned that he planned to stay there until sunrise. He liked watching it. She then made a small request. "Stop calling me hey, call me by my name." Kao agreed. but he did complain about how underdressed she was for the chilly night. Without a second thought, he gave her his jacket. Since they were going to watch the sunrise anyway, Futaba figured it would be better to do it together with everyone. So she called the others. That moment became a turning point. Murao, after thinking it over, apologized for how she had judged Futaba earlier. At first, she saw her as a hypocrite for trying to rid the class of loneliness. But throughout the day, her opinion had changed. This was their first real memory together. And for Futaba, this was a huge step forward. She might not have been able to bring back the old Q, but she had just seen the current Cow genuinely having fun. Maybe he wasn't so bad after all. Unfortunately, peace never lasts forever. Because now Yuki, having grown comfortable around Futaba, confessed something shocking. She liked Q. When Futaba arrived at school, everyone was talking about the same thing, the question Cow had asked her. But from the way Yuki looked at Q, her feelings weren't exactly a secret either, so even Murao easily figured out what was going on. Futaba, on her part, denied having any feelings for Cow, so there shouldn't be a problem helping Yuki. Since she had known Cow in middle school, the others asked her what he was like back then. Futaba started to recall, but all she could think about was how nice he smelled, which had made her get too close to his neck. On top of that, he had a smile that made her fall for him instantly. Clearly, she couldn't say that, so she just claimed she didn't remember. At that moment, Hu arrived, asking for help with a report the class representatives had to do. However, Murao wasn't interested and Yuki was busy, so the only one left was Futaba. She hesitated because, after hearing Yuki's confession, she wasn't sure if it was okay to keep liking Q. To make matters worse, Q fell asleep for a while, and Futaba, unable to resist, leaned in to smell his hair again. What she didn't expect was that Cow had always noticed her obsession with his scent and actually found it quite weird. After embarrassing herself, Futaba was still unsure whether she should stop liking him. While they were at the train station, Futaba made a sudden decision. She told Cow she had to go back to school, and if he didn't go with her, she would forget about him forever. Strangely enough, at the last second, Q got off the train, making Futaba hold on to her feelings for him. However, going back to school was just an excuse because she hadn't actually forgotten anything, so they just waited for the next train. While they were there, Q casually told her that her hair smelled nice. Since she didn't wear perfume, Q assumed it was because of her shampoo. That compliment made Futaba so happy that she decided to buy a new shampoo just to impress him. The next day, when she told Q about it, he apologized, saying he had only been joking, but he said it in such a serious tone that it was easy to misunderstand. After that awkward moment, Futaba went back to class, where Yuki invited her and Murao to grab something to drink after school. Futaba couldn't hold it in anymore. She had to tell Yuki how she felt about Q. When Yuki heard that Futaba was in love with Q2, she tried to act strong, but she quickly ran to the bathroom. When she came back, it was obvious that she had been crying, though she never said anything bad or looked at Futaba differently. Seeing this, Murao told Yuki that Futaba was a great friend for being honest. Then, she told Futaba that Yuki was also a great friend for accepting her feelings despite how she felt about Q. Because of this, Futaba and Yuki made a pact. They would accept Q's decision no matter what. In other words, they would remain friends regardless of who he chose. However, they were forgetting one tiny detail. Q could still reject both of them, so they couldn't afford to relax or assume one of them had already won. That night, as Futaba was walking home, she saw Cow in the distance, hanging out in the park with some guys who looked like trouble. That made her furious, so she went straight to him, telling him to go home. But Cow refused. Since he didn't seem interested in Futaba, one of his friends tried to hit on her. That made Q angry, so in an attempt to drive the guy away, he blurted out something ridiculous. Futaba hasn't showered in a week. Then he grabbed her arm and took her away from there. As they walked, they found a stray kitten, which made Futaba forget about scolding Cow for a moment. However, he didn't seem interested in bonding with it. According to him, every time someone became important to him, he ended up getting hurt. Futaba found that incredibly sad, and when she told the girls, they were also worried. To make things worse, Q's grades kept dropping because of his lack of interest. That's when Futaba had a brilliant idea. She would make a surprise visit to Cow's house over the weekend to force him to study. Cow had no choice but to let them in, but actually joining the study session was a different matter. So he just stayed in his bed while the others studied, or at least, that's how it was until Kaminato sat next to Futaba to study. For some reason, that made Cow suddenly feel motivated to study as well. To everyone's surprise, he was actually good at studying. He had just lost his motivation. After a while, he got up to wash the dishes. Meanwhile, Murao and Kaminato went out to buy some things, leaving Yuki alone, checking through Kyo's stuff. While wandering around, Futaba ended up stumbling upon a small altar dedicated to Kyo's mother, who had passed away. Kyo told her that it wasn't really a secret, but it also wasn't something he mentioned to just anyone. It turned out that Kyo had loved his mother dearly, and she had been a really good mom. There was no way not to love her. However, she had terminal lung cancer. At some point, Kyo stopped visiting her because he couldn't bear the thought of losing her. After everyone left, Tanaka-sensei came over to cook dinner, but Ku was upset with his brother for giving his friends his address. He just wanted to push people away. Because of that, the next day, Murao quit the study group. If Kyo had no motivation, then there was no point in continuing. However, the others still wanted to keep going. Later, Murao ran into Tanaka-sensei, who was happy to hear that Kyo had such good friends who were willing to go all the way to his house just to get him to study. Feeling encouraged by this, he even bought them some things. Seeing how optimistic Tanaka-sensei was, Murao changed her mind and decided to force Kyo to spend time with them and study. That surprised everyone, but they took advantage of the moment and gathered at the library. However, Kyo had no intention of studying and ended up sneaking away. Futaba, of course, wasn't about to give up. She rushed after him, but while running, she crashed into a guy named Tuma. To make things worse, her hair got tangled in his button. After struggling for a bit, she finally managed to free herself and hurried to Kyo's house. But when she got there, it was Tanaka-sensei who answered the door. He was making dinner for Kyo. Still, Futaba went in and asked what time Kyo would be back. However, Tanaka-sensei wasn't expecting him to come home at all. Whenever he visited, Kyo always avoided him. Futaba didn't understand why their relationship was so strained. That's when Tanaka-sensei explained that it hadn't always been like that. They used to be really close, but after their mother passed away, everything changed. At that time, Tanaka-sensei had been extremely busy, so he ended up leaving all the emotional burden on Kyo. That was why Kyo no longer let anyone get close to him. But Futaba wasn't going to let him push her away. She was determined to force her way into his life. So she ran back to where their friends were and grabbed Kyo's hand, dragging him away. That clearly made Kyo uncomfortable, and he tried to get her to leave him alone. But instead, Futaba tackled him to the ground. She told him that he didn't have to be unhappy. If his mother had left a huge hole in his heart, he could fill it with her and their friends. Even if they couldn't fill it completely, at least they could help him find happiness again. No one would judge him for living his life and moving forward despite his mother's death. Those words hit Kyo deeply, so much so that he started crying. He pulled Futaba into a hug, keeping her close so no one would see him like that. After calming down a little, Kyo finally confessed something. He had liked Futaba when they were kids. Back then, when they played cops and robbers, she always ran straight toward him. What he didn't know was that she had done that because she liked him too. But she didn't get the chance to say it, because before she could, her stomach growled first. Because of that, Futaba remembered that Tanaka-sensei had prepared lunch for Kyo, so she sent him home. Surprisingly, he actually listened for once. Not only that, but for the first time in a long while, he had dinner with his brother. Seeing this, his brother was so overwhelmed with happiness that he burst into tears. Kyo couldn't believe how sentimental his brother was being, but he took the opportunity to confess why he had avoided eating with him. It wasn't because he didn't want to, it was because their mother couldn't be there. However, Tanaka-sensei reassured him, saying that their mother wasn't someone so petty as to forbid him from eating with his family. There was no need for him to carry such worries. Now that his personal issues were practically resolved, Kyo returned to school and apologized for running away. With that, they all resumed their studies, not just once, but day after day, reviewing their toughest subjects together. In the end, Kyo scored even higher than everyone else, which was pretty amusing. Still, all their efforts paid off as every single one of them secured a spot in the top 50 of their year. One day, Yuki invited Kyo to the summer festival, and he decided to invite the whole group as well. They all went together, but Yuki stuck to Kyo like glue, while Kaminato was constantly hovering around Murao. This left Futaba feeling a little left out. To make matters worse, a child bumped into her, causing her to spill her drink all over herself. Just then, Tuma spotted her and approached, offering to help clean her up. Ever since he had seen her in the library, he had found her attractive. As they made their way to a quieter spot to clean her up, Kyo suddenly appeared and tried to shoo Tuma away, claiming that Futaba was his girlfriend. However, Futaba quickly denied it and walked off with Tuma since he was only helping her. This irritated Kyo a little, but he ultimately let it go. As the night went on, Kyo became restless. Without realizing it, he wandered around for too long, dragging Yuki along with him. As a result, Yuki ended up hurting her foot. Feeling guilty, Kao helped her put on a bandage. Taking advantage of their close proximity, Yuki finally confessed her feelings for him. However, Kyu apologized he didn't feel the same way. Yuki already knew this though. When she had once looked through Kyu's notebooks, she had seen Futaba's name written in them. Still, she had wanted to confess before giving up for good. Later, Futaba saw Yuki with teary eyes and asked if she was okay. Yuki simply smiled and said she was fine now. She had finally settled something important. After that, Kyu and Futaba walked home together. Feeling caught up in the moment, Futaba confessed her feelings for him. But just as she spoke, a train passed by, completely drowning out her words. Regardless, Kyu wanted to spend more time with her. When they saw a poster for the festival they had once promised to attend together, Kyu invited her again, this time just the two of them. The others already had plans, so it would be their moment alone. Futaba happily accepted, and it seemed like their relationship was progressing rapidly. They teased each other more and had grown much closer. However, out of nowhere, Kyu called her, apologizing. He told her he wouldn't be able to go to the festival with her. Just like that, Futaba came crashing down from her excitement. To make things worse, she didn't see him again for the rest of the summer vacation. When she returned to school, Futaba was worried that Kao had disappeared again, but this time that wasn't the case. She found him completely chill, acting like nothing had happened. That annoyed her a bit. After all, he hadn't said a word about what happened after canceling their plans that night. Kyu finally explained that he had to visit his father's house and that a lot had happened afterward, including taking care of a stray kitten and several other things. In a way, it was understandable. Interestingly, Kao had changed a little after the summer break. He smiled more, studied harder, and was more relaxed around Futaba, but in a different way. That's when she realized they had gone back to just being friends. During lunch, she shared her thoughts with the girls, and it became obvious that for a brief moment, she and Kao had been more than just friends. Eventually, she admitted that they had actually planned to go to the festival alone. It felt a little like a betrayal to Yuki, but since Yuki had already confessed and been rejected, she reassured Futaba that she didn't have to worry about her anymore. That noble gesture was so sweet that Murao couldn't help but hug her, and Futaba, thinking Yuki was the cutest in the world, joined in the hug too. After their little gossip session, they went back to class and noticed that Kao had been using his phone a lot more than usual. They started coming up with theories, but all Futaba knew was that she was annoyed, because he wasn't even replying to her messages. Frustrated, she sent him an angry emoji. In response, Kyu immediately showed up next to her, asking what was wrong. Caught off guard, Futaba had to come up with something on the spot. To cover it up, she invited him to grab burgers after school. Coincidentally, Tuma was also at the same place. His friends saw Futaba and commented on how unfortunate it was that his crush had a boyfriend. Embarrassed, Tuma quickly denied both claims, but the reality was that seeing them together did sting a little, because yes, he actually was really into her. Meanwhile, Futaba asked Kyu about the constant messaging, and he explained that during his trip, he had run into an old friend who had lost a family member. He had been talking to her to offer support. Futaba completely understood. Kyu, more than anyone, knew what that kind of loss felt like. She let go of her jealousy and even encouraged him to take his friend's call when she rang. However, because of that, she ended up alone. Tuma's friends, noticing this, took advantage of the moment and left too, forcing Tuma to stay with Futaba. Their plan worked, and since Futaba genuinely liked Tuma as a person, their conversation flowed effortlessly. Unfortunately, Kyu took some time to reflect and realize that what he really wanted was to be with Futaba, so he turned back, only to find her and Tuma eating together. The next day, preparations for the festival began. As usual, Murao tried flirting with Tanaka-sensei, and as usual, he rejected her. Kaminado warned him not to hurt her, but Tanaka-sensei just playfully responded that, in that case, he would date her without hurting her. Meanwhile, Kyu's classmates started asking if he liked someone. From the way he answered, they could tell there was someone on his mind, so they kept pressing him. This annoyed Kyu, and the atmosphere grew tense. Thankfully, Kaminado lightened the mood with his jokes, but Kyu's irritation remained because he had just seen Tuma openly flirting with Futaba, and she wasn't doing anything about it. Frustrated, he dumped all the class representative work on her. As a result, Futaba had to stay late, which gave Tuma another opportunity. By chance, he saw her in a maid outfit, which she insisted didn't suit her, but in Tuma's eyes, she looked absolutely adorable. At that moment, Kyu also showed up. Seeing him, Tuma decided to leave. Feeling a bit more confident in how she looked in the outfit, Futaba asked Kao for his opinion, but Kyu, in his usual blunt way, coldly told her it looked terrible, completely crushing her feelings. She wasn't actually crying, but she wanted to teach Q a lesson. So she faked it, listening to him regret being so harsh. However, she almost laughed at how much he was humiliating himself. What finally gave her away was her reaction when Cal suddenly sniffed her hair, just like she always did to him. Shocked, Futaba stopped covering her face, revealing that she hadn't been crying at all. Afterward, they both returned home, but when Ku arrived, he found Kaminado waiting for him at his place. Kaminado had been worried about him. After seeing how irritated Q was at school, he wanted to check on him. Kao explained everything about his grieving friend, so Kaminado finally understood why he'd been so stressed. Still, he felt bad for Q. Kao had no one by his side 24/7, and if they had met sooner, Kaminado swore he would have never let him be alone. Those words made Kao blush. Flustered, he used the excuse of going to look for his cat and left. That left Kaminado alone in Kao's room, and that's when he saw it, Kao's notebook, and written inside it, Futaba's name. When Kao realized, he freaked out. At first, Kaminado pretended he hadn't seen anything. But then, out of nowhere, he casually asked, "Do you still like her?" Kao's reaction said it all. Of course he did. Kaminado lost his mind over the discovery, but Kao had no intention of actually pursuing her. A few days later, the festival began. Futaba's class opened their maid cafe with reversed roles. The boys were the maids. The girls were the butlers. It was a total success. Tuma took the chance to visit Futaba, but when he saw her, he couldn't bring himself to say anything he had planned. Meanwhile, Murao was struggling to carry a heavy box. Kaminado swooped in to help, but only because Tanaka-sensei had asked him to. That made him so jealous. Feeling frustrated, he told Murao, "I like a girl, but she likes someone else." Murao almost rejected him right there, but Kaminado quickly clarified, this isn't a confession. He still had time. Time to show her how amazing he was, and time to steal her heart. A little while later, Kaminado turned to Ku. "We both need to give it our all," but Ku was already falling behind. Tuma kept taking the initiative, and now he had invited Futaba to his concert at the festival. Unfortunately for Tuma, Ku showed up at the concert. In the middle of the performance, he tried to talk to Futaba, but with all the noise, she couldn't hear a thing. So he stepped closer, and when she turned around, their lips accidentally touched. Futaba froze, but Q acted like nothing happened, and then he left. Tuma, however, had seen everything. After the concert, he told Futaba, "That was just an accident, a meaningless one, so forget about it." Of course, Futaba didn't want to believe that. And then, Kao showed up and confirmed it. She didn't need to worry about it. Heartbroken, Futaba ran away. Back to Futaba, she ran and ran, but no matter how far she went, she couldn't outrun Ku. So she confronted him. She mocked a kiss. "It must have been so bad that you want to forget it." But Q corrected her. That wasn't it at all. So to prove just how wrong she was, he kissed her again. And this time, it wasn't an accident. Season 2. Days later, Futaba and her friends started talking about the festival. It was obvious that she was hiding something, so she finally confessed she had kissed Ku. This shocked the other two, but their confusion quickly followed. After all, they weren't even dating yet, and Futaba wasn't sure if what she felt was really love. She even wondered if the kiss meant anything to Ku at all. Murao, however, got annoyed. Kisses weren't something you could just ignore, so Futaba couldn't dismiss Ku's feelings so easily. Determined, Futaba decided to confess to Ku. However, as they were leaving school, they ran into the friend Kao had been comforting, Narumi. Futaba's confession plans had to wait. The three of them ended up going out to eat together. While Ku was in the bathroom, Futaba and Narumi talked about their relationship with him. Futaba admitted she wanted to be more than friends, but luckily for her, Narumi assured her that she and Ku were just friends who had gone through similar experiences. After talking for hours, they parted ways. But as Futaba and Ku walked together, he recalled how Narumi used to be in middle school, straightforward and selective with her responses. She believed that even when faced with a difficult question, you could always answer in a way that avoided discomfort. Yet earlier at the burger shop, she had chosen not to answer a certain question at all. That meant she was feeling worse than she let on. Realizing this, Kao ran after Narumi. Futaba hesitated but eventually followed him. Tuma, seeing her rush off, decided to follow as well, creating a chain of people chasing each other. Unfortunately for Futaba, Narumi noticed her. Seizing the moment, she hugged Kao, making it clear that their friendship might not be as simple as she claimed. Q, seeing Futaba's reaction, didn't pull away. He had already decided that he would stay by Narumi's side, no matter what tactic she used to win his heart. Futaba felt her heart shatter. Tuma, noticing, pulled her away. Later that night, when Q returned home, Kaminato was waiting for him. Having seen him leave school with Futaba, Kaminato had expected something romantic to happen. And in a way, he wasn't wrong. It had, just not in the way he had hoped. When he heard that Q had chosen Narumi over Futaba, he got mad. Q was caring too much about Narumi, to the point of sacrificing his own happiness. But Q didn't change his mind. Instead, he found comfort in the fact that he had friends who got angry for his sake, something Narumi didn't have. That only convinced him further that she needed him. The next day, Futaba told her friends what had happened. Murao, frustrated, went to Kaminato and told him to convince Q not to let go of Futaba. But Kaminato had already given up, which was odd for him. He always fought to the end. Murao found this side of him admirable, and she reminded him that he had once promised to show it to her. After school, Tanaka-sensei asked Futaba for a favor. Q had skipped class due to a cold, and since Tanaka couldn't go home yet, he sent Futaba to bring him medicine and ice cream. Nervous, she went to Q's house only to find him crying in his sleep. Seeing this, she gently covered him with a blanket, left him a sweet note, and quietly left. Q had finally begun to forget the trauma of losing his mother, but being with Narumi only reminded him of it all over again. Because of that, she went to talk to her at school, but coming on behalf of Futaba took away all her credibility because Narumi didn't believe she was doing it simply for Q's sake. Besides, she had already resigned herself to doing anything to win Q over, so she asked Futaba not to try to keep her away from him. The next day, Futaba and Tanaka-sensei were called to the principal's office because a student had seen her handing him the keys to his house, which would lead to a lot of speculation. Then Q rushed to explain to the principal that she had only gone to give him medicine, so Tanaka-sensei got out of that big problem with just a scolding. Unfortunately, the rumor had not died down, but Tuma loudly stated that it was all a misunderstanding due to Tanaka-sensei's overly kind nature, which everyone believed, since he really was an affectionate person with everyone. Futaba, on her part, remembered Murao, so she ran to explain to her that she really had nothing to do with Tanaka-sensei. At that moment, Q thanked Tuma, which was clearly a provocation, but it didn't escalate since the only thing harmed was a button on Q's shirt. Back with Futaba, she explained everything about the misunderstanding to Murao, but she was actually more concerned about how careless she had been, realizing that if someone had seen her kissing Tanaka-sensei, it would have been a huge problem, and she hadn't even considered it. Because of that, she decided to put an end to her attempt to win over Tanaka-sensei, and for that, Yuki and Futaba gave him a note summoning him to the rooftop. Tanaka, for his part, deliberately left that note at Kaminato's feet and then went to the rooftop, where Murao was waiting for him. She wanted to confess that ever since he had shown her his secret, his birthmark near his eye, he had stolen her heart, so she confessed how much she loved him, but Tanaka-sensei couldn't return her feelings as he had only seen her as a student all this time. Because of that, Murao left feeling sad, and Tanaka-sensei told Kaminato to stop eavesdropping, since he had hidden himself to hear all the gossip. However, Tanaka was actually glad he was there because now he could leave Murao in his hands, as his only fear was that no one would steal her heart while he kept control over his actions. Hours later, Futaba also confessed her feelings to Q, but he rejected her. This was more of a relief than anything for her, as it allowed her to move on and try to fall for someone else. However, it was still sad because now all three friends were part of the rejection club. Even so, Futaba wasn't lacking in opportunities as Tuma wasted no time and invited her to see his band after school. Q saw everything in full HD, but he did nothing. So after school, Kaminato scolded him for letting her go, insisting that he could seriously lose Futaba. Q said it didn't matter, so Kaminato left his house, but not before telling him that he didn't have to take Narumi's problems as his own. Back with Futaba, she returned home with Tuma, Tuma's friend, and Yuki, but the latter two disappeared to leave Futaba and Tuma alone. Tuma took full advantage of the moment and confessed his feelings immediately. Futaba was in shock. She hadn't expected Tuma to be so direct, especially at that moment. Her heart was still unsettled from what had happened with Kel, but seeing someone who truly cared about her made her feel something different, something warm. However, she couldn't give him a clear answer right then. Tuma, noticing her confusion, told her that she didn't have to respond immediately, that he could wait, but he also made it clear that he wouldn't give up. In the following days, Futaba tried to understand her own feelings. On one hand, she still had feelings for Cal, but on the other, Tuma's sincerity made her feel special. Meanwhile, Ku began to notice everything. Even though he had decided to let go of Futaba, seeing her spend more time with Tuma made him feel something he didn't want to admit: jealousy. During preparations for the school festival, the tension between Q and Tuma became more evident. Each of them found excuses to be near Futaba, and she, caught between the two, didn't know how to react. It was at that moment that Murao and Yuki intervened, telling her that she needed to clarify her feelings before the situation became even more complicated. Finally, the day of the festival arrived. Tuma and his band had a performance, and before going on stage, he searched for Futaba in the crowd. When he found her, he gave her a smile and told her that the next song was for her. Q, who was also there, felt a knot in his stomach. It was in that moment that he realized he was losing something important, but was it too late to do something about it? Futaba clearly didn't know how to respond, but not because she wasn't prepared. She had probably imagined the conversation with Kao countless times, just not with Tuma. Seeing her hesitation, Tuma told her not to give him an answer right away since he was determined to make her fall in love with him. Meanwhile, Ku was having dinner with Narumi, but the atmosphere felt off. Kameneo's words kept echoing in his mind. He didn't have to take on other people's problems, but even so, those problems were affecting him. He had lost so much weight that he ended up fainting while running during PE. Because of that, he was taken to the infirmary where, by sheer coincidence, Futaba found him. She immediately told him that he needed to eat more. Kao replied that she wasn't eating much either, since she was going through a transformation to become more feminine. However, she had the advantage of not passing out from eating less. Even so, she wanted Q to eat properly, so she proposed that they both go back to eating a lot. That casual conversation made Kao realize that he really needed to move on with his life. He then thanked Kaminato and promised to settle things with Narumi so he could finally confess to Futaba. And he kept his word. That afternoon, he met with Narumi and told her they couldn't keep seeing each other. However, when it came to Futaba, things were more complicated. He couldn't just tell her everything outright. Before he even had a chance, Tuma got ahead of him and asked Futaba out on a date. Since she had promised herself that she would try to fall in love again, she accepted. Kao, on the other hand, tried to talk to her indirectly, but it didn't work because Tuma showed up to take Futaba with him. Ku tried to stop her, but if he wasn't clear with his feelings, she wouldn't stay by his side forever, so she left with Tuma. Realizing he had to act fast, Tuma asked Futaba to give him an answer soon. If she accepted him as her boyfriend, he promised he would make her fall in love with him and help her forget about Kao, something Futaba wanted deep down, so she said yes. The next day, Kao finally worked up the courage to confess his feelings to Futaba. No more beating around the bush. However, it was already too late. Murao told him that Futaba was now dating Tuma. He refused to believe it until he saw it with his own eyes. Through the window, he reached out and placed his hand over Futaba's, but Tuma quickly pulled them apart. At that moment, he had no choice but to leave defeated, at least for now. Meanwhile, Tuma took another big step, sealing his promise to win Futaba's heart with a kiss. Days later, Kao started acting as if he was the happiest person alive without Futaba. However, his behavior was so exaggerated that even Kaminato felt secondhand embarrassment. He eventually asked Q to stop since it was painfully obvious that he was faking it, but Q didn't know what else to do. He couldn't get Futaba out of his heart. Meanwhile, Futaba kept going on dates with her boyfriend. After their exams, they went out for a walk and, by chance, ran into Narumi. Futaba immediately ran to her to thank her, believing Q was smiling more than ever because of her influence. Of course, that wasn't the case, but Narumi didn't say anything. So Futaba walked away thinking that she and Q were still in contact. However, Narumi felt terrible because, in reality, Kao had never smiled like that when he was with her. That little detail was devastating. Hours later, Futaba was on her way home alone when she ran into Q. Neither of them said a word, so Q just walked past her. But a moment later, he turned back after spotting a shooting star. They both got excited and made a wish. However, Futaba quickly left because she started to believe that Q was still in love with her. After all, he had turned to look at her at that exact moment. On top of that, there were too many small actions from Kao that hinted at his lingering feelings, but she chose to ignore them. She didn't want to complicate things because of her past love for him. Days later, Futaba's entire class went on a school trip to Nagasaki, the province where Kao had once moved. However, Ku wasn't ready to give up on Futaba just yet. To get closer to her, he used Kaminato and his motion sickness as an excuse. Because of that, Kaminato was allowed to sit at the front, and the only available seat left for Q was next to Futaba. This immediately set off alarms for her friends, especially Murao, who shot Q a judgmental glare. She didn't want him messing with her friend, who had finally gotten a boyfriend. However, there wasn't much she could do since Futaba spent her free time with Tuma anyway. Even so, Murao confronted Q and told him not to interfere with Futaba's relationship. Q agreed, or at least he said he would, but it was obvious that he still had feelings for her. Just then, Kaminato arrived and asked what they were talking about. Murao simply replied that Q was an idiot for expressing his feelings too late. Kaminato agreed but didn't think that was a reason to crucify him. After all, taking too long to go after Futaba was a mistake, and mistakes happen to everyone. Meanwhile, Futaba and Tuma were watching Yuki and Tuma's friend flirt. However, their free time soon came to an end, so Tuma invited Futaba to meet him on the balcony that night. By chance, Q ran into her while on his way to buy a drink. Immediately suspicious, he questioned her to see if she was going to meet Tuma. When she admitted it, he suddenly pulled her into the storage room using the excuse that he had spotted a teacher nearby. Futaba, of course, heard nothing, so she tried to leave. But Q stopped her, saying she shouldn't be meeting up with Tuma at that hour. Futaba snapped back that what she did with her boyfriend was none of his business. However, before she could leave, their voices caught the attention of some teachers nearby. It was only a matter of time before they got caught. Seeing no other option, Kyo decided to sacrifice himself just like he had when they were kids playing hide and seek, but this time, Futaba didn't run after him to save him like she had back then. Even so, she felt guilty, thinking she had gotten Kao into trouble, but Tuma reassured her, saying that things would have been worse if they had both been caught. That was why Kao had taken the fall alone. His words put Futaba somewhat at ease, but she started worrying that she was annoying Tuma by always bringing up Q. However, Tuma was actually happy. If she had told him everything, it meant she truly didn't have feelings for Q anymore. The next day, Futaba's group went sightseeing in the city, but Q seemed somewhat down. The memories he had of that place weren't happy ones. Seeing this, Futaba asked Kaminato to cheer Q up, since it was clear how much this place affected him, but she could no longer be the one to stand by his side. Kaminato agreed to help, but Murao warned him not to do anything weird to push Q and Futaba together. Luckily, Kao cheered up on his own after watching the sunset with his friends. Up until now, he had always hated sunsets because on the day his mother passed away, the sky had been cloudy. It had always bothered him that she never got to see a beautiful sunset. However, seeing one now of the people who cared about him changed the feeling entirely. At that moment, he had finally healed from a traumatic memory. Because of that, the next day he decided to do the same with the hospital where his mother had passed in his old neighborhood, until they finally arrived at his mother's grave. There, she introduced herself as Q's friend and promised to look after him so he wouldn't stray from the right path. After that, they took the bus back to the station. Futaba, exhausted from all the walking, fell asleep on the ride. Seeing the chance, Hu gave her a soft kiss on the head while she slept, proving that, at least for him, this wasn't just friendship. Unfortunately for him, Futaba wanted it to be just that. While waiting for the train, she even hid the scarf Kao had lent her, knowing she would be seeing Tuma as soon as they got back. But things didn't go so well for Tuma either. When Futaba returned, she was not only sick, but also restless with guilt. This time, she couldn't bring herself to tell him she had spent the entire afternoon with Kao, because, deep down, that trip had meant something to her. And even though she tried to hide it, Tuma still noticed that something was off. That night, he went straight to Q and told him to stop interfering with his relationship. However, Q made it clear that he wasn't planning to back down. That was a bold move, too bold, but Tuma wasn't intimidated. He was confident that he wouldn't lose to Q. However, in the end, it wasn't his decision to make, it was Futaba's. After the trip, Futaba decided it was time to talk to Tuma. The moment she said that, he felt true fear, but before she could say anything, he quickly told her that he had something to say first. Because of that, he invited her to a concert he would be performing at for Christmas. Futaba happily accepted. Then it was her turn to talk. What she wanted to do was be completely honest about her time with Kao, because if they were going to have a healthy relationship, it had to be built on trust. That was normal. In fact, it was something that would ultimately benefit Tuma too. Meanwhile, Narumi reached out to Q once again. She told him that she was the one who understood him best, which meant she was the right person to stand by his side. But Q's heart had no room for anyone else, only Futaba. So once again, he had to turn her down. Desperate, Narumi chased after him and outright confessed her love. But Q already knew that, and even so, Futaba was still the only one in his heart. Realizing there was no hope left, Narumi finally gave up on him and set him free for good. With things now crystal clear between him and Narumi, Q went straight to Futaba and asked her to go out with him on Christmas. She immediately tried to reject him, using the excuse of "I have a boyfriend." But Q wasn't going to accept that so easily. Futaba felt frustrated. They were always out of sync, always getting stuck halfway, never fully reaching each other. Ku wanted to change that, but it was too late. Futaba was already planning to forget about him completely. Time passed and Christmas was just around the corner. Kaminato took the chance to ask Murao out, telling her that he was the one who made her heart race and all that romantic stuff. But Murao didn't even flinch, making Kaminato think he had no shot with her once again. However, today was his lucky day. Overjoyed, Kaminato ran straight to Tanaka-sensei to tell him he had managed to get a date with Murao. Instead of teasing him, Tanaka-sensei was genuinely happy, saying it was about time Kaminato made some progress, otherwise he might just steal her once he was no longer a teacher. That, of course, made no sense since they still had more than a year before graduation. But in a way, it did make sense. Tanaka-sensei was leaving the school very soon. Meanwhile, Futaba couldn't remember where she had put Ku's scarf. And despite saying she was going to forget about him completely, she didn't want to lose that scarf. It was the only memory she had left of him. Realizing how desperately she had torn apart her room just to keep that one piece of him, she finally understood the truth. She couldn't move on. So she confessed to Tuma that she couldn't be with him anymore because deep down she knew she would never truly forget about Ku. Tuma couldn't understand why she loved Ku so much, but the truth was even Futaba didn't have a clear answer. She just loved him, his good sides, his flaws, everything. And so, with no other choice, Tuma let her go. Days passed and winter break began, meaning Christmas had finally arrived. Tuma focused on preparing for his concert, but the one having the best time in the band was his friend, because he had somehow managed to start dating Yuki, who had completely fallen for the rock star. On the other hand, Kaminato broke the news to Murao that Tanaka-sensei was leaving the school. But then, he promised her that if she accepted him as her boyfriend, she would never be without love. Murao, realizing that the one who insists eventually wins, accepted him with a smile. As for Futaba, she wandered the streets aimlessly when, out of nowhere, it started to rain. She ran into a shrine to take cover, but the moment she stepped inside, a flood of memories rushed over her, because this place reminded her of Ku more than anything. And as if fate had planned it, Ku suddenly appeared. Futaba immediately told him that she had been looking for him all night. She had finally made up her mind she wanted to be the love of his life, because she was sure of it now, she was the right person for Ku. And Ku felt the same way. She was the only woman who had been, was, and always would be in his heart. And so they sealed Christmas with a kiss, a real kiss, under the pouring rain. A few days later, life continued as usual. Tanaka-sensei left and everyone tearfully said goodbye. Even Tanaka-sensei himself was emotional, knowing how much he was loved by both his students and his brother. Meanwhile, Narumi took her first steps toward moving forward, trying to make friends instead of relying on Ku. And speaking of Ku, he changed his last name back to Tanaka, which meant that officially Futaba was once again dating Tanaka Ku, her first and only love. And the only man she would ever love.